have been a CLO for all of 8 months. And before that, I was working in universities. And so just prior to coming to PepsiCo, I was at the Yale School of Management, where I ran executive education. And I had the privilege of working with brilliant faculty at the Yale Center for Customer Insights. And the great research they were doing, particularly on consumer understanding and behavioral economics, inspired a lot of what I'm going to tell you today. So my question for us today is, are we at peak content? PepsiCo's vision is to be the global leader in convenient foods and beverages by winning with purpose. And so to achieve this, we have to give our employees every resource that they need to succeed. We have to offer professional development that's easy to access and consume. And we have to do all of this inside an agile working environment. So today I'm going to talk about what we as CLOs can adopt from our marketing friends to achieve all of this and improve overall the learner experience. So I think this quote says it all. According to Nielsen, Americans spend more than 11 hours a day reading, listening to, or generally interacting with media. And we all know that learning is not a bubble. It exists inside of this larger environment. We're competing with Twitter, Facebook, Netflix, meetings, deadlines, texts, voicemails, and all the other activities, family activities, extracurricular that our employees have to cram into their days. So how do we help them with this? And that's what I'm going to get into here. So when I joined PepsiCo 8 months ago, we had 22,000 learning assets in our LMS, and everyone to a person told me there's not enough training. So what is going on? Okay, so my theory is that as CLOs, we spend too much time optimizing content and not enough time reducing barriers to learning. So I think that we work very hard modernizing, updating, adding to our content libraries. We work very hard to improve our in-person programs, getting them from a 4.5 out of 5 to a 4.8 out of 5 in participant satisfaction. And meanwhile, our employees may very well feel overwhelmed by the amount of learning resources they have at their disposal. And so this concept of choice fatigue is something that's been well documented in other areas. There's a nice study out of UC Berkeley where the faculty looked at voting across the state. And they found that lowering a given contest by one position on the ballot increased the number of undervotes by 0.11 percentage points. So the researchers concluded that choice fatigue was causing voters to either not make a choice at all or to choose not to change the status quo. And so you apply this to learning, and you think about the position that we're in, being asked by our employers to drive organizational transformation. And we know that the status quo isn't good enough. So what do? I mean, do you slash the learning catalog? Do you say pare it back to 2 or 3 resources per topic? You could, but what would you cut? I mean, I'm getting choice fatigue just thinking about all the choices I'd have to make to reduce our learners' choice fatigue, right? And employees, no doubt, as human beings, believe that more choice is better. And those beliefs are very, very hard to change. And as chief learning officer, you don't want to be in an awkward position of being the person in the company who's reducing opportunities to learn. So I decided, after a lot of angst about this, to just give up on it. And instead, I think we should learn from our marketing friends to do a few other things and think beyond content. I think that we can reduce frictions in learning. I think once we do that, we can find new ways to motivate our employees. And I also think that we might reframe the entire value proposition of L&D overall and unlock new value that we can add. So what do I mean about reducing frictions in learning? So marketers are very, very good at mapping customer journeys. So from, say, the point where you realize you have a need to the point where you make a decision to buy a product. And I think we should apply this methodology to learning. So what path must your learner traverse to find what he or she is looking for? How many clicks, searches, decisions does he or she have to make? I actually suggest that you map this out. And once you do, consider using the concept of defaults to give them one fewer decision to make in their day. I'll change gears for a second. Countries throughout the world have had an age-old conundrum of trying to increase the number of organ donors in the country. And many of them have launched expensive and laborious PR campaigns to convince their population that organ donation is a good idea, to make moral arguments and talk about the impact on society. And it didn't really have any good. It didn't do any good. And what some countries did instead was they simply made organ donation opt out instead of opt in. And the countries that did this saw a much bigger increase in organ donation than the countries that didn't, even when they had similar rates of the population agreeing that organ donation is a good idea. So why am I talking about this? Well, because how much time are we spending convincing our employees that learning is a good idea, that it'll drive their careers, that it will accelerate their growth, that it'll make their workday more enjoyable? But maybe they already know, and maybe they just need our help getting to the learning faster and making it easier to consume. So my idea here is to simply use this concept of defaults, auto-enroll people in a certain program that you know that they might benefit from based on what you know about their profile and so forth, and let them opt out rather than having to opt in. Another idea is to use this psychological principle of mental accounting. Mental accounting refers to this irrational approach we have with money, where we treat it as fixed in purpose. And so a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. But we think that, we think it's not. We think it's not flexible enough across spending priorities. And so this leads us to do silly things like dutifully deposit a monthly amount in a low-yield savings account while our very high-interest credit card bill goes unpaid. I think we do the same thing with time. Yes, there are only 24 hours in a day, and yet we can spend them how we like. I think our learners make this mistake in that they allot themselves some secret learning budget every week or every month. And it's just fixed. Like they think for whatever reason that that's the amount of time they should spend learning. And what if that month it's all used up by your compliance training, and then there's nothing left over? And so I think that rather, again, than trying to change a belief when beliefs are hard to change, is to help your learner move learning into different time buckets. So one idea would be the commute. Okay, this isn't a time we typically think of as learning time, but you could do a small experiment where you transfer some of your video library, you create audio files, and you let them listen to it in the car and see what happens. This is a low-cost idea. You can do it with just a portion of things, with a portion of people, and see how it goes. And finally, I think technology is always a solution here. I've never been a big fan of technological solutions for behavioral problems, but I think the new generation of learner experience platforms is going to be a huge deal. Many of you probably use these. We're piloting them at PepsiCo right now. This is a system that sits on top of your LMS. It curates learning for your employees based on their profile and interests. It uses artificial intelligence to improve the recommendations it makes, much like Netflix does. It's social. I can follow you. You can follow me. You can see what other people are doing. And so I think this is going to be a huge step forward for learning. So once you've reduced all these frictions, let's try to motivate our employees in new ways. So back to marketing. Marketers, again, have known for a long time that you can't talk only about a product's features. You have to also talk about its benefits. So your phone, with its large screen, has the benefit of making it easier to use and having less strain on your eyes, right? So now marketers are moving a bit beyond benefits to thinking about the customer's goals. So what's the difference between a goal and a benefit? So according to Professor Ravi Dar at Yale School of Management, a benefit lives inside the product, but a goal lives inside the customer. So let's say that you have a program that teaches people how to tell stories with data. That's the benefit of the program. But then you find out that your learner's goal is to be seen as an expert by his or her peers. You could make a quick and easy redesign to your program to allow alumni to stage a takeover of the internal social media feed and spend the day posting insights from the program. The learner gets the opportunity to be a thought leader, and your program is the hero. So moments of truth is the other piece of this. And a moment of truth is just a stark decision point. So often a moment of truth is when someone realizes the value of learning in like a really visceral or emotional way. So you could do this by inviting an executive to a town hall style meeting and having him or her speak about a special moment in their lives when something they learned made a huge difference. They got a promotion, they made a better decision. And then as everyone's filing out, your team is there ready to sign them up for that new program you've created that just happens to address, all the things that that executive just talked about. So that's an opportunity that is tied to the benefits of learning, right, in the positive side. But you could also do something called a counterfactual. This would be, what would happen, not if you did learn, but if you didn't, or if you never learned? Perhaps you could create a hashtag like a day without learning and encourage your employees to post about a tough meeting they had months ago when they weren't really sure what everyone was talking about. And of course, you can go first to break the ice. Another marketing technique and psychological technique is social proof. So social proof just refers to our desire to kind of validate our own choices by seeing what other people are doing. So the first example here you might recognize from the hotel industry. The last time I was on Airbnb, they told me how many people had been looking at that property in the past few days. The second example is from your local electric company. Perhaps some of you got a bill last month comparing your energy usage to your neighbors, whether they used more or less than you did. All this can be applied to learning. And then finally, if worse comes to worse, you can always remind them how good they have it and how much worse it could be. Okay. So lastly, I thought we could talk about ways to unlock new value that you add in your organization. And this is, so marketers are really great at thinking about the concept of framing and how framing a product or a solution or a problem helps people to see it in the way you want them to see it. And in this example, I'm actually referring to the way that you and your own team frame what you deliver to the organization and frame how you think about that value. So a few months ago, we took a group of executives that were part of an internal leadership program to visit Tesla in California. And we met with a few executives there, and they spent most of the time talking about their solar projects and their battery projects. And someone in the audience said, "Are you a car company?" And they said, "We're an energy company that happens to make cars." And so I thought, gosh, what if I thought more like that? And what if, as learning professionals, we could reframe our value from something like this to something more like this? And think about all the different initiatives, value that you might go after if you thought about your value that way. A colleague of mine at a completely different company told me about some internal research they did that showed that employees who meet regularly with their manager perceive that they're more developed than employees who meet less frequently with their manager. And going back to my original point about being at peak content, perhaps, no courses were involved, right? So think about how you might work in better partnership across the rest of your HR colleagues to improve the employee experience in ways that you might not have thought of before. So we are super early in this journey. All the things I shared are very, very early ideas. I'd love to take you with us on this, so I hope that you'll keep in touch. And thanks for your time, and I'll hand it back to Mike.